Well, go get your popcorn, friends, because this one is going to be a little bit longer. Make sure you have something to drink and make sure you're sitting down in a space where you can sit for some time. And if you need a break, you can always pause it and go back to it. But I encourage you to take some notes about this because there will be a quiz like there were for the other two. But also, it'll be good for you to know in the midst of doing your job as an RA. There are lots of policies and procedures when it comes to being an RA, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the main ones, and we'll go from there, all right? So there are just some basic tenets of being an RA. One is that we want you to know the policies that you're enforcing. Nothing is more embarrassing when you are handling an issue in the hall and you don't know what to do. The second thing is probably one of the more important things of being an RA is always treat others with respect. Even when you don't think that they deserve it, because you're going to have some jerks probably in your time as RAs, and so you're going to have to make sure that you always keep your cool and show respect even when it's not being shown to you. The next thing is to work as a team. It's important for you all to work as a team because at the end of the day, that's all you have. You guys have each other, right? And you're always gonna. The work is always lighter when there's more hands, and certainly the work is a lot better when all are involved. Keep your eyes and ears open. This I think goes without saying that we are moving into a brand new hall here, and we want to make sure that it stays that way. That it stays in good shape, that the work that we're doing in there is well worth it. And so, when things are happening in the hall, keep your eyes and ears open and handle them. Duty just doesn't, you're on duty not just when you're officially on duty, but also when you are in and around the building. Be fair, because I think, you'll have less of a jerk factor if you are fair to other students. Think before you act. I think emotion gets the best of us. As we talked about, Vector is managing emotions. I think we are, as RAs are not infallible, but we have to think about how we act professionally and be thorough. I think if it's a job worth doing, you should be doing it right. So whether that's programming, whether that's handling a situation, a roommate conflict, work orders, you name it, it's important for you to be thorough. And with that, just like hand in hand, is to be consistent, because nothing says or nothing loses your floor if you're or your hall, or it makes you look like the worst RA ever, is if you're not consistent in the things that you do. And the last thing I'll say as far as basics go is you need to walk the line. And when I say walk the line, we recognize that you are all students, and we say that you are students first, and we try to stick to that. But you are also staff members, and so it's this precarious kind of situation where you're both students and staff members, and you're walking that line, right? I don't expect that any of you will be partying with your residents, because that's the quickest way to get fired. But certainly showing favoritism, becoming besties with other residents, dating other residents, it's definitely frowned upon. And so just kind of know that we expect you to walk the line and be professional. To talk about a little bit about RA duty, breaking it down into the most basic form is that RA duty begins at 9 p.m. and lasts until 8 a.m. the next morning. A typical duty night is as follows. And again, these are kind of one of the newer things. I think that some night classes will be some exceptions, but certainly I would like folks to start duty at 9 o'clock. A typical duty night is as follows. Monday through Thursday is 9 p.m. to midnight, where you're doing 3 rounds in that time frame. And then the weekends, which is Friday through Sunday, that it starts at the same time but goes to 2 a.m. And then in that time frame, we will add an additional round. The important thing to think about when you're doing rounds is that you don't want to be predictable. We ask you to be consistent in your following of policy, but we don't want you to be as consistent with doing your rounds, just because we don't want sneaky residents, like there are any of those, right? We don't want sneaky residents to establish a pattern for your rounds. So if you start, do one in the 9 to 10 hour, do one in the 10:30 to 11 o'clock range, or in the midnight to 1, I think that you will be okay. So you can spread those out, but as long as you're doing them and spreading those out consistently, I think we'll be okay. When you start duty, the first thing that you should do is contact the staff person on call. You'll have a calendar with you that'll be a physical calendar, but then you'll also have the calendar that'll show who is on call on the MyCIA in case you ever lose that calendar. Then and just know that once you've reported for duty, that we want you to be in the building, right? We don't want you to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to run over to Chipotle across the street. I can still respond to that. We want you to be in the building. So make sure that you've made your Chipotle run or your Jimmy John's run prior to starting duty. And then once your round is complete, you'll have access to an electronic duty log that feeds into. It's a Google Doc that we'd like you to put on your iPad as an app. And you'll do a new log for each round. Kind of talks a little bit about what you saw, if there was any kind of activity, and again, we don't want you to be like sweet, cool, nothing. We want you to use full sentences when describing your round and describing the kinds of things that you see, because again, like I said, basic tenet of being an RA is keeping your eyes and ears open. So what happens in the event that you need to make a switch? Well, we try very hard at being as fair as possible when it comes to the RA duty schedule, but we also know that there will be times where things will come up and RAs will have to switch, right? Just know that if it can be helped, we need to be updated as soon as possible, if not well in advance. And we try to keep those to a minimum, because you got to understand, it's much more than being like, oh, well, I'm going to take duty for so-and-so tonight. I just want to let you know when you call in our person on call, because our schedule for RA duty goes to not only me as the Director of Student Life and Housing, but it also goes to Nancy Neville. It also goes to the University Police Department. So that way they know who to call in the event that there is an emergency. So if you need to make a switch, again, like I said, notify the hall director in as much advance as you can, right? And who's going to be taking your duty, right? The RA who is taking the duty night must respond to verify the change. So that way we know that if Maddie is taking duty for Jack, that Jack has actually talked to Maddie about that, and Maddie is indeed agreeing to take that duty night. It's just a matter of communication and making sure communication is as clean as possible. And just know that any schedule changes must be approved by the hall director, or the hall director or the staff person on call. They have the right to say no. So that's why it's important for you to make as much advance notice as you can, and to talk a little bit about, during RA training before the schedule is done, times in which you need to have off. We got some issues, that could occur on duty. You have some noise issues and alcohol and drugs, and certainly roommate issues happen while you're on duty that you might need to take care of. I mean, roommate issues happen when you're not on duty. But in any event, we're going to talk a little bit about how to handle some of those issues. Noise is more of a lower level offense. If it's a consistent issue, then that's when we want you to document it. But certainly, if noise it's a first time kind of noise thing, put it in your duty log, and and just so we know that there is so we know that there's some sort of past, some paper trail regarding the issue. If it becomes persistent, that's when you fill out your incident report, and we'll move on. It'll move on to me. So, rules about entering a suite. RAs may enter into student rooms under the following circumstances, in which, in most cases, 2 staff members should be present. The first premise would be when a student or institute property is believed to be in immediate danger, or you have an inkling that something illegal is going on, or is a violation of student code of conduct. The second is during room inspections or when advance notice has been given. So we will talk a little bit later about health and wellness checks, or which you'll set up with your residents, or at the end of breaks where you go in and make sure things are that need to be unplugged are unplugged, windows are shut, drapes or blinds are down, those kinds of things. Okay. The third thing is that when you're performing a closing, like at the end of the year, or checkout duties, and then the last is when the resident says it's okay. At no time will RAs open a student's room door for anyone other than the resident of the room, unless permission is given by the resident or the RAs have been told to do so by professional staff. The reason why we don't want this is that, theft. It might be a joke and it might be kind of a funny thing, but the reality of it is we don't know what the intentions of those pranks are, or we don't know what the intentions of those other students are. So under no direction other than from pro staff or the student themselves should you let anybody else into their room. We had a few kind of touch and go situations or questions, I guess, about when you go to the door. When you think something is going on behind that closed door, what is it that you do, right? Well, the first thing you need to do is be prepared, right? It's a nerve-wracking thing. It's probably one of the least favorite things of being an RA, right? But you need to be prepared. Do you have the RA phone? Do you have something to write with and on? If you feel like it's going to be something that's going to be big, do you have somebody else with you, right? So when you pull in that second person, before and again, this seems like it's a long process, but it's not as long as you may think it is. Go together, decide when you're at the door, who's going to take the lead and who's going to assist, because this helps for a couple of things. Because the lead person will step to the door, knock, and identify themselves. If this is the RA, I need you to open the door, right? Wait about 10-15 seconds, and then knock again and announce yourself again. This time, get your ID out, right? If they still have not opened the door, now's the third time to state RA keying in. So what happens once you go inside? I guess you're a little nervous about what's going inside, but the reason why you decide who's going to take the lead and who is going to kind of assist is that the assistant should be the door person, and the one who said they're going to take the lead should walk into the room, right? So in this case, you have the person sitting at the door who is scanning the room for what's going on, and then you have the person in the middle of the room who's more the business side of things, right? If when the lead walks in to the room, they should state why they're there, and ask everyone to give them their IDs. If alcohol is believed to be involved, or drugs or what have you, can ask the residents to open the refrigerator, open the cabinets, the microwave, anything that you feel that you need to look in. You can ask them by saying, I need you to open whatever. This is important. Use that kind of language, because if you say, can you, they can say no, right? you're only scanning for what is in clear sight, right? If they say, no, I'm not going to open my fridge, they have the right to do that, but you're also scanning what's in the room. If they refuse, then you have the person at the door call the GA on call, right? The GA on call can actually run the search, and you can tell your residents that they can search a room. You should all, like I said before, get all the IDs of the individuals in the room, and it's important for you to write a complete incident report after that gives the details. I can't tell you how many times I've received incident reports that have been incomplete, or they have lacked the kind of information that we need in order to get a clear picture about what happens. You know, for those who, you know, when you're drawing or painting or doing, you know, things, you're kind of putting a whole scene together, and that's what an incident report is. It's not just a singular object, it's the whole scene, and you're trying to paint that picture for us. Sorry for the pun. When you're doing an incident report, know that an incident report online is a singular report. And so if you have multiple people involved in an incident, you will have to submit multiple online incident reports. Okay? So the best rule of thumb when you're writing an incident report is to type it out onto Word or whatever kind of word processing program that you're using, and then cut and paste the contents into your incident report, and then just change the names. So what happens if I go to the door and we get all, you know, we get our plan together and we open the door and there's loud music and we open the door and no one is home? That happens. If RAs enter into a room believing that that there's some reason for being there and no one's home, then walk back out of the room and make sure you lock the door. I mean, in this case, the doors will lock when they close. If you walk in and you see violations in plain view, you should note those and then confront the residents of that room later. Things that are major violations, weapons, drugs, those kinds of things, should be reported to a professional staff immediately, and even the university police, and they'll come and handle those. If there are candles or incense left burning, those should be extinguished before leaving the room. There are some times that you should not enter a student room. One is based on some secondhand information or based on suspicion. RAs should wait for the residents to return in this case and confront them directly in the privacy of the room. And don't go out in the hallway. Don't go confronting them in the lounge or outside and on a patio or the laundry room, wherever. Don't do that. Ask them to step into their room and talk to them a little bit about what's going on. Again, this goes back to that respect thing. Because what can happen is if there is serious issues going on, if it is deemed appropriate by the pro staff and then the residents aren't there, we can disable the lock, so that way they won't be able to get into their room, and they'll have to go speak to a staff member first, in which then you can talk to them about why their lock was disabled and that and what they're being documented for. So we talked about, knucklehead residents who might refuse something, right? So if residents refuse to respond to your request, there's a couple of things that you can do. One, don't force your way into the room. You shouldn't go all Charles Bronson on them, or whatever, The Rock, if you will. You should call the grad staff and that's on call to come in and assist you, right? We know that they're there, and we know that there's a reason why they're not letting us in, right? You should assert yourself, in asserting yourself, you're not kicking down doors, but you're certainly saying, look, I'm asking as a college official to enter your room because I believe that this is going on. Just let me in, and that way we can see. If not, that you're going to be documented for being suspected of this issue, and we're going to call the grad staff who will enter the room. So it's one of those things where it's like, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way, right? So, we look at the incident report. So what's included in an incident report? Student information, right? Name, room number, phone number, that kind of stuff. There is detailed information about the incident. Right? I want you to be as detailed as you can. So include the who, what, when, where, and how. It's so important for you to do this. Other things to include in that is, were they compliant? Because for me, as the judicial officer of the school, it's important to know that they are compliant or not, and based on their compliance to your request, I will either be more harsh or less, or lenient, I guess, on them. And also include in the beginning of the statement, what was it that drew you to the room in the first place, right? So some other helpful tips: be respectful, be firm and assertive, but not aggressive and threatening. Be observant. Again, this kind of goes back. Use the CIA Code of Conduct to your advantage. That's something you can point out to. And again, that goes to knowing the policies that are in place. Repeat yourself. You might have to do that. Be patient. Try to address the situation in the room, like I said, rather than in the hallway or public areas. A great one is to not take it personally. So important that they are the ones who are violating the policy. Your job as an RA is to document the things that you see. You're not the judge. You're not the jury. You are just documenting what you've seen. And again, don't focus too much on the outcome. People are upset and angry about being held responsible for their actions. Remember, one of the reasons why I had you do the programming piece first before this was that you can understand that during this time they may be dealing with that assertiveness issue, right? Issues with authority, those kinds of things. So don't focus too much on one outcome. Each incident is different, right? One student may handle it totally different. And never argue with somebody under the influence of alcohol. It will never end well. You'll go in circles. It'll get frustrating, and then you'll kick yourself in for doing it after you're done. So some common alcohol incidents to talk a little bit about. One, we talk about bottle decor. People like to decorate their rooms and with the nanny light border, and maybe putting highlighters in alcohol bottles, or maybe it's a stack of cans or what have you. Whatever creative solution they can find for their alcohol. But if a student possesses empties used for decoration, the RA should either have them themselves take them out and recycle them. If they are, for some reason, and you can use the fact that the alcohol bottles are, the uptown is dry, and that alcohol bottles are a violation. You can't necessarily assume that they've drank all the alcohol because they're empty, or they have highlighter stuff in them. But what you can say is that we don't want to assume that you have done this, so I'm going to give you the choice to either get rid of them, or we will document you for it. If for some reason they want to keep them and say, I'm just going to take them home with me the next time I go home, you can turn them over to the hall director, who will put them in kind of the contraband lockup, if you will. And then they would just need to see the hall director the next time that they are going to make the trip home, and then we'll give them to them. So what happens if they're not decoration and they are in possession of alcohol bottles and cans? Well, one, you need to make sure that you have all the information you need at the time of the incident, right? So, how many cans, where they were, whether they complied to open refrigerators, or or they came clean and got rid of other stuff. You need to inform the student that they are being documented for the incident, and that they will be receiving an email from me regarding setting up a judicial meeting to talk about alcohol possession. And if there are cans laying around the room, I don't want you to take the cans out or the bottles out, right? Because then that puts you in possession of alcohol. What I want you to do is, after you've documented and gotten all the information that you need, I want you to ask for a couple student volunteers to help take all the the beer and or cans and bottles and whatever, and take them to the recycling bin. If they have liquid in them, have them dump them out in their sinks in their suites, and then have them take them out to recycling. And last but not least, write the incident report. So what about an intoxicated student? The first thing I really want you to do is, we hire you for your good judgment. One of the many reasons we hire you. But we want you to take a look at the situation, right? And assess for yourself, is the person responsive? What kind of medical attention do they need? What is their mood? Are they breaking things? Are they tearing things off the wall? What's the situation? Then you can figure out whether the person we need to call the grad staff on call, the university police, and get this person some help. And again, always err on the side of caution. So the person is extremely intoxicated, they're throwing up, they can't stand, that kind of stuff, then it's time for them to go on the squad, right? Because then they pay for that squad, and that might be punishment enough for itself. Don't argue with drunk folks, like I said. And these are some of the other things I've already talked about. Now, in the event that they vomit, which may happen, if it's in their suite, they are responsible for cleaning it up. And so it's kind of up to them to do that. If it's in a public area, then you need to call the grad staff on call, and then they will facilitate kind of the on-call cleaning, the 24-hour cleaning crew to come out and do biohazard. But if it's in their suite, they are responsible for their suite, and so they are responsible for cleaning it up. So what happens if it's just suspicion, right? We think that we've heard secondhand, or we think that there might be some drinking going on. It's okay to go and ask residents if there's drinking going on. There's a reason why you were called to the door, and you can share that with them, right? And discuss why you're concerned. Even if there's no beer, just say, look, this is why I came to your door. I'm sorry, I didn't, mean to accuse you. However, you need to understand that when these things happen, this is what I think of, right? Or this is why I was drawn to your door, or this is what other people are saying. And just, it's always good to reiterate the alcohol policy, why you're there and your responsibilities for doing some of these things. And then last but not least, consequences if they were indeed to be found responsible for alcohol. So next we'll move on to drugs and marijuana, and this is probably one of the the hardest things for an RA to come across, and for a couple of reasons. One is typically for marijuana, by the time that they have smoked or vaporized marijuana, that it's hard to catch them doing that, right? Because it's gone. But in the event, here's some scenarios that we can go through that hopefully will give you a better idea of what to do if you're faced with this. So if you think that someone may be smoking weed or, doing drugs, one, find another staff member to help confirm that, right? And again, time is of the essence when this happens. You also need to contact the grad staff member on call. They'll come over. Once you feel like it's confirmed, call University of Police, and they're always a good barometer for that. They have training, more intense training than we'll ever have in this, so they'll have a better understanding of that. Wait for the officers to confront the situation, because you never know what's going to be behind that closed door. There was a time where I remember when I was in grad school and I was a hall director, I went into a room because I thought I had suspected that we were smoking marijuana, and sure enough, there was a giant pile of weed and a lot of we got a lot of students who were not our students, and they were not very happy. And so I don't want to put you all into situations where you may come into harm's way, and so in this sense, wait for the officers to confront the situation. Once they get there, the police will probably want to have a game plan to attack, or not to attack, but to confront the situation. And so, so I think it'll be in your best interest to try to figure out how to work with the police, and the GA who's on call should be there by then, so they'll certainly take the lead on that. And last but not least is documentation. Again, that's where those who, what, when, where, and how come into play, and it's very, very important. Next scenario is someone tells you that there are drugs in the room. It's important for you to get as much information as possible. So you should ask, well, how do they know? How do you know there are drugs in the room? Where were the drugs last located? When did they last see the drugs? Right? Who do you think brought in the drugs? Which roommate is the one who's smoking it? In the event that it's neither roommate. So you want to gather all information you can about it, right? Then contact the grad staff on call and the university police. The grad staff will consult with the police department as well as myself. And DSLH means Director of Student Life and Housing. If someone tells you that someone they know has done drugs in their room, just say, for example, I know this guy, right? Again, you want to find out as much information as you can, because there may be addiction issues, and certainly drugs and alcohol are nothing to fool around with. But you want to find out as much information from the student who's concerned, because you also want to be able to help the student, right? Who's being suspected of this. So it's important to follow up with that suspected resident and have a private conversation with him or her. This is one of those things where you need to do it in their room or in your room. And one of the reasons why you all have couches is, for those kinds of reasons. And so talk to them about your concern, and don't discuss about how you know it, but rather that there are others who are concerned about them just as much as you are concerned about them, and that you want to make sure that if indeed that they have a problem, that you're helping them find help. If they admit to doing some of those things, then you ask them if they have it in their room currently. If they do, call the police department and do not leave the room, right? You don't want them flushing it down the toilet or anything like that. Other things you want to do to help the student, because certainly if they are found in violation of the drug policy, is that they're automatically going to go and be assessed, right? It's part of the sanctions that we give students who are caught with marijuana. So, we'll be referring that student to counseling, but it's always good to hear it from an RA, because you've built that relationship with them, and so you yourself should refer that student to counseling. And then, of course, do an incident report, right? That's usually the last step of it. But you need to make sure that as you are going through these, you document as much stuff as you can and remember. And then last but not least, follow up with that resident, because again, it goes back to what I talked about. There's a separation between, what you need to do as an RA, your job, and what you're required to do, and then your concern for residents. Documentation is not always the easiest thing, but it's a part of your job, and so you're going to have to, let them know that, say, look, I'm not the judge or jury. I'm just documenting what I see, but I am concerned about you and the kind of behavior that you're doing, and I just want to make sure that you get help if you need it. So what if you walk in unexpected, right? And we all, as RAs, we have good relationships with our residents. Sometimes we have that, from that Seinfeld show, the Kramer rules, where you can just kind of pop in and say, hey, what's going on, right? So let's say that you walked in unexpectedly, and there's weed everywhere, right? One, you need to keep your wits about you and stay calm, or two, and don't leave the room. You need to be direct about what you suspect and what you see. And then again, start with that process of asking for IDs, observe other things and take notes. And then use your phone if you have it on you, but certainly you can ask one of the residents to use their phone. If they refuse to use their phone, you have already witnessed and seen everything that's in the room. And so, you can, document that right then and there. and then maybe ask a neighboring student or a passerby to use their phone, or go get another RA or the hall director on call. For those who are in the room, you want them to make sure they stay in the room and really ask for their cooperation. You want to assist other staff, including the police in that case, because then you would treat it like you would the other drug issue. Call the police and let them handle it, because one, you don't want to be handling drugs, right? In much the same way we don't want you handling cans of alcohol or bottles of alcohol, we do not want you handling drugs, because you will be in possession of an illegal substance, right? So that, going back to that story about when I was a grad student, I I documented the situation. I had taken their drugs, and I basically took it from their room and I walked it over to the security area at the school I was working at, and they looked at me and started laughing at me, and I was like, "What?" And they said, "Well, Matt, I understand what you're doing, and I don't think that you were doing anything with these, but as the hall director, but you are in possession of a illegal substance. You need to make sure you just call us and we will come get it." So it's always important to make sure that university police are in on the loop, especially when there's actual paraphernalia and substances in the room. So moving away from that to more pragmatic kinds of things like work orders, our work order system is very similar, but it's changed a little bit. The first thing that I want you to do is that any and all work orders should be emailed to the hall director. All right, the hall director will then forward work requests to the building's management, who are in charge of maintenance, and those folks will follow, and those folks will do them, and then the hall director will also follow up on any work orders that he or she has been told have been completed. In the event of evening emergencies, some of the things we're going to do during training is we're going to teach you how to, shut water off at the valves, plunge toilets, plunge drains, those kind of preemptive measures or smaller measures to save, to kind of make a clog go away or something. That will help save time with some of these emergency issues that could probably, if we were able to shut it off or were able to plunge a toilet, would help with not only cost, but also having somebody come in at 3 a.m. to plunge a toilet, right? If we can do it ourselves, and if it's a repair that can be done during the day, that's how I'd like to do that. So, next thing is fire alarms. A couple of things about fire alarms that you should know in Uptown. The first is that when the fire alarm sounds, there will be emergency doors that shut, and they will shut to close off elevators. There will be doors that open as emergency exits that are at the west end of the building that lead into the other apartments for non-students. But students and staff should use stairwells when the fire alarm goes off. The other thing about the alarms, there are sprinkler systems, and the fire alarm panel is down on the first floor, and we'll show you all that when you come in training in August. The last thing about the fire alarm, in the 4th floor atrium, there is a motion sensor. This motion sensor is meant to start a exhaust fan that will suck up all the smoke out of the building in the event of a fire through the roof. But the sensor is a beam of laser beam or a beam of light that goes across the whole atrium from one end to the other. If a student breaks that beam, then what will happen is it will trip the alarm into a kind of an alert. It won't set the alarm off, but it'll trip the alarm into an alert situation where the hall director or maybe even the RA on call will have to go down and silence it. But when the alarm goes off, report the alarm to the University Police Department, as well as the grad staff on call. If it's the hall director, then we know that that he or she will respond, right? But if it's the other grad staff on call, you need to make sure to call them. You'll need to help facilitate the evacuation of students, right? And this means starting, of the 9 suites that you have on your floor, and believe me, the fire alarm is loud. There's no way that students will sleep through this. But in the event that you don't see students running from their rooms, you need to make your best effort at banging on the doors of the 7 to 9 suites on your floor to make sure students go down the stairwells or to the nearest exit. If there are students with special needs, obviously you will know about them. They live on your floor. You need to help direct students with special needs. You should have with you the most up-to-date roster information. This may mean you may want to grab your iPad because you'll have access to that through your iPad. So that way, any students that may be unaccounted for, you'll have information outside to assist. The stairwells will lead students out the back of the building, so the north side of the building. And what you'll need to do is have students get as far away from the building as possible. This may mean having students go and walk over into the uptown area by Constantino's in the parking area back there, and being as far away from the building as possible. In the event of a false alarm, when the all clear is given, students may come back into the building. Under some circumstances, you may be asked to go back into the building with the hall director to check for complete evacuation of all residents. Again, if the building is burning, I'm not going to make you go back in the building and check, but in the event that that is possible, you may be called on to asked to do that. So it's important that you know evacuation maps in the hallways. So by the time you move in, probably closer to when students move in, those evacuation maps will be hanging in the hallways. And as far as just a little note on fire alarms, there's 2 drills that'll happen a year, 1 per semester, and so we'll plan those, and you'll be in on those, but your students won't. And so per fire drill, we'll run the fire drills, and we'll just run the instructions. Excuse me. Run the instructions that I just gave you, and work on those drills. One of the great things about Uptown is that we are going keyless. So a student's ID card is not only their access to the building like it was in Taplin, but it is also the access to their room. Even the mailboxes are going to be combination mailboxes. So what happens in the event a student loses their ID, because it's kind of like their life's blood, Well, the first thing that we want you to do is call the GA staff on call. Both of these individuals will have access to the software to be able to give and take access away from students from the building and their room. So they will program a temporary ID for a student, so that way the student can get into their room, into the building and into their room. But the student should be told that they will not be able to eat until they go to see Karen and pay to get the yellow card to take the case and print out a new ID to be programmed then. And yes, again, it's still $25. Also, the grad staff on call should contact Access Services and let them know that that student has lost their ID, so that way their meal plan is protected from that. And grad staff on call should know and should find out from the student when they last saw their ID or last used their ID. So some other stuff that you need to know, and it may come in handy at some point, room changes, right? There's a 2-week moratorium at the beginning of the school year for roommate changes. Another thing you need to know is that we're going to be full. We're going to be beyond capacity and some of the rooms that we have will certainly be temporary housing for students until spaces open up. And so those students may move prior to the 2-week moratorium, but we might not have space, and that's something that that we need to be aware of, and so do students. We try to match students up the best we could, but roommate agreements are huge, right? In the roommate mediation information that you've probably looked over, you've seen what those roommate agreements look like, right? They're actually physical roommate paper that roommates, suite mates, and themselves document who they are, how they want to live, and the rules around how they want to live, right? And so it's important to make sure that they fill those out, that you've had your meetings with them, that they know that if there anything changes or it becomes issues, that they need to come back and meet with you to change those agreements and talk about some of those changes. So we talk about the roommate mediation process, right? In the event that they need to talk it out, right? It's laid out on MyCIA. And we need to reiterate that sometimes roommate situations need time to work themselves out, right? They need to be open to working out and compromising, living together. The other thing that's important about switches is that we just don't, if one roommate is a bad roommate, and if the other roommate is the one coming in and saying, look, I can't live with her, then that's the roommate that leaves. It's not the one who's being bad, right? Unless it's really bad. But in most cases, the roommate who brings up the issue and really just wants to have a better situation, that one is the one who's going to move. We're not moving the other. It's also based on availability and whether or not the hall director approves it. But the key to that process is that roommate mediation needs to have been had. Right? One of the new things that we're doing in the hall is health and safety checks, right? This will be starting in the fall of 2014. And this is because of the kitchenettes, the interior workrooms, as well as the bathrooms, right? That you will have to fit, students will now have to clean their own bathroom, clean their own kitchenette rather, and then be responsible for keeping and maintaining a healthy work environment in their workroom area. And so as RAs, you're responsible for figuring that out and working through that. We are a few of our RAs have been a part of our new hall policy task force and procedure task force, and have come up with worked to come up with a great system for doing some of those health and safety checks. So they'll happen twice a semester, and then you will set those up with your residents. What I would encourage you all to do is to wait about, a good couple weeks, maybe a month after the first month of school, start scheduling them with your residents, and then toward the end of the semester, probably after Thanksgiving, have another go round with it. Follow the process, and again, this is on MyCIA, so you have the understanding of what is going to be expected of you to do that. And when you're scheduling, it's important to tell your residents at least a full week ahead of time that you will be doing them, and have them set up appointments with you. I think that'll be great, because that way they have some buy-in to what's going on, and that way they know they have how much time to clean their bathrooms and kitchenettes and areas. So in order for them to do that efficiently and effectively, or at least to our standards, you need to give them the details of what the checks are and why we do them and what our expectations are, right? And so we'll give them information about that. And when you perform them, you need to be thorough and consistent, and give feedback when necessary, because if they're not up to our standard, then we tell them what they need to fix, and then we give them another couple days to do that before we follow up. If we follow up and they still have not done that, then we will enact a $75 charge for cleaning staff to come in and clean. So let's talk a little bit about mental illness, because I think that's another kind of procedure that happens. And and what we know is that more in higher education, more and more students are coming to college they're on all kinds of medications for a variety of different illnesses, and that also includes mental health issues. Second thing we know about mental health is that for some reason the time period of like post-adolescence, if you will, around college age time, 18 to 22, mental health issues start to rear their ugly head. And some of the symptoms of those issues start to become real for students. And we also know that sometimes it's linked to creative types. But more so than not, we also know that it is stress induced. Whether it's simply, when we say I'm taking a mental health day, we know that that's kind of on the lighter side of mental health. It's more of like a stress relief day, rather than them being taking a mental health day because they're schizophrenic, right? So stress has a huge impact on the mental health and mental well-being of students on a wide spectrum of issues. So some possible signs that you should look out. Students who are withdrawn, they may have erratic behavior. They may have poor hygiene, right? They haven't taken showers. They haven't eaten or slept rather. Some have anger issues. Anxiety is a huge thing. You might have some students who are really, really high, upbeat, like crazy, like energy and feeling great, and then they are super low. And it's not, everyone kind of gets highs and lows in their lives, but this you have an understanding this is not a natural kind of high and low, that there's something at play here. Some may hear voices or be unable to cope with life and with their studies or with anything. Some may have suicidal thoughts. Some may use substances, right? So those are a lot of different symptoms for a lot of different types of disorders. It's not just one mental health disorder and all of those symptoms are a part of it. So those are just some signs and symptoms of a much greater issue. So how can you help somebody who has some mental health issues? One, you need to listen to them. Really listen to them, right? Get down, when we're talking about roommate mediation, some of the things that you probably noticed about how the RA was sitting, eye level, at a kind of an equal, like showing like a kind of a signs of equality. Like the chairs are the same height. You're not standing over them. You're sitting down at eye level. You're engaged. You're leaning forward. Rest your elbows on your knees, kind of, or on your thighs when you're sitting and talking to them. And really engage them in a conversation and listen. Because you'd be amazed at when you really listen, what you'll be able to pick up on. The next thing is to show support. Reaffirm what they're telling you and say, I understand, what I hear you saying is this, right? And I'm really sorry this is going on, with you right now. Or I'm really sorry this is happening to you. So let's talk a little bit about how we can find you some help. One, they know they can always get to the counseling center, right? There's an emergency counselor on a call in the evening, and there's emergency hours every day in the counseling center. If they're having trouble, have them come and talk to me in the Student Life and Housing office, and we will make sure that they get to the counseling center and get the help that they need. The other thing I think is really important for all of us is that we're helpers, right? We want to help students as much as we can, but there comes a time where when you've expelled your expertise, right? When you kind of cross that line into, I don't know where this is going or how I'm going to be able to help this person. And this is where when you need to get the hall director, myself, or the dean of students involved. So a couple other things when you're talking about people with mental health issues is that, talk to them. If they feel like, I'm going to end it all, talk with them and see if they have a plan, right? if they say, I just feel like killing myself, or I feel like the world would be better without me, maybe they're not really planning on killing themselves, but maybe they're just saying those kinds of things because they're really down, or they're angry, or they're upset. But you should also know if they say, no one wants me around, I think I'm just going to go tomorrow and just jump off a bridge. That should set a huge red flag for you to not leave that student alone, but to go get the hall director, and the hall director will call the counseling center person on call. Excuse me. And between the two of you, and three of you rather, you can work to get that student the best help that they need, and which may include hospitalization. But again, know that there is always somebody with a paid grade higher than you, and there's always somebody there that can help you do that. So I think that's all for now. Hopefully this has been helpful for you and has given you some insight onto all the kind of nooks and crannies and pieces of performing your duties. And we'll look forward to talking to you more in the recap when training starts about this, and answering any and all questions that you have.